Good morning, everybody. My name is Dr. Patrick Flynn, and welcome to a different perspective on this beautiful Saturday, snowy morning here in Green Bay, Wisconsin. Yes, I left my house right around just before 4 o'clock and drove through about, I say 4 to 5 inches of snow. It was a nice ride in. No chance of an accident. It was kind of nice, but it was just a great, beautiful morning when all of a sudden, even though it's still dark out, that beautiful light coating of snow was absolutely beautiful. So that being said, welcome to our third part of Sugar Series. I'm hoping to wrap some things together for you today. I'm hoping to bring you some of the stuff we talked about before, put some points in that we did from the first 2 episodes. But then remember this. We're going to continue our No Sugar January very intensely. Thank you all you guys that are constantly posting on the page. And we have some surprises that we're going to do with that page even more as January ends. So all of you guys saying, Doc, are you going to continue? I will continue. I've actually was discussing this with my wife last night. We continue to keep the sugar down because why? Because it just allows people to actually learn and create more recipes and put them on my page. It's been a very good thing for everybody. So we're going to continue this process. It's going to be fun. We have some other challenges we're going to do on our page, so hang in there. We got our media team is working on some great things with everybody to do. So that being said, today I know a lot of people have really wondered. We're talking about so much about sugars and understand the components of it. If you remember from the first 2 episodes, if you haven't watched them, please go back because it does explain a lot. If you look at, sugar in general, people always think it's bad. Because why? I can honestly tell you because of obesity and weight problems, it has been a big contributor. But as I will probably end today, I think the greatest thing that has come along where people are not understanding sugars is the fact that that's been the biggest contributor to why people think it's so bad. Sugar is needed. So to think that it's bad doesn't make any sense. Now, do we know what to do? No, obviously it's pretty well shown just in our American public about just even obesity itself, or type 2 diabetes, or type 1 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes is at an all-time high. It continues to rise. So that can show you that the understanding of sugars is not there. So that's why part 1 and 2, to understand things from monosaccharide, to polysaccharide, oligosaccharide, disaccharides. Now, what are those? Well, go back and watch episode 1 and 2 and you'll see why it's so important to know that. But today, what we are going to do is we're going to go over some of my favorite sweeteners. Now, before I get into it, what I want to cover is this. My opinion. So today is based on a lot of opinion. Now, let me say that. When I present statistical facts about what is in sugar and what they're used for that way, that's pretty well known. There's people that will disagree that this sweetener should be higher than the ones I said or vice versa. I'll give you a little prelude on here. Stevia isn't, I'm going to cover 5 sweeteners today. Stevia is not one of them. Now, Doc, oh my goodness, but stevia? Well, I'll get into why, some of the things why I don't have certain sweeteners up there. But everything that I'm giving you is actually based on being a clinician. Let me say that again. Everything that I'm going to give you from the standpoint of my opinion. Just like I told you, if somebody goes to the doctor and the doctor says, do this, and you disagree with them, they say, well, you can go for a second opinion. Well, guess what happens? I'm telling you right now, my favorite sweeteners are based on my opinion, based on my clinical experience. And no one can take that clinical experience away from me. Why? Because countless of thousands and thousands and thousands of people see Wellness Way doctors every day. And so we apply this clinically. Now, did I learn this in school? Nope. Let me say it again. No way. Man, what they teach you in school is basically this, and you got to figure stuff out. Well, what we did is decide to figure it out clinically. And I'm going to use the examples where even some of my sweeteners I tell you, in the top 5 that I love, guess what happens? There are some times that one of the sweeteners has to be used at a minimal. See, so just understand this, that when I give you my top 5, it's based on my clinical experience over the course of 20 years, plus the clinical experience of all of the Wellness Way practitioners across the world. So that's why people say, well, Doc, I disagree with you. Okay, I mean this nicely. If a person just blogs and says that this sweetener caused them digestive problems, I'm sorry, but they don't have that much credibility beyond themselves. So therefore, once again, I'm saying that because everybody, even last night on our No Sugar page, people say, after reading this article, I don't believe that this is good for you. Well, okay, just understand, go dig a little deeper. That's why I've tried to give you so much understanding of part 1 and 2 about sugars itself. Now, that being said, let me tell you this. And I think this sets the basis for even sweeteners or anything. Because a lot of people say, well, an avocado is good for you. Well, I can show you where an avocado can be extremely bad for you. So I want to start when it comes to sweeteners just to say this. Any food can cause gastrointestinal distress. Because when you talk about sweeteners, a lot of people are like, well, doc, it can aggravate the GI. Anything can aggravate the GI. I can honestly tell you this, and this is from clinical experience, and I guarantee if my docs are on right now, they'll give me a thumbs up on this, or they'll comment exactly. Do you understand that the reason why most people feel some gastrointestinal problem after it is because they have digestive problems? They have digestive problems. There's people that actually could not tolerate xylitol, that now, after avoiding sugar for now, let's say, 18 days or 17 days, I actually got a message, well, it's probably a couple days ago, that, doc, I can eat these things that I couldn't before. And all I did was avoid sugar. Well, what happened is you pulled away some of the inflammatory sugars that caused some GI disruption, some stress, and guess what happens? Now you put it in, it doesn't bother you as much. So this concept of when people say that this sugar causes GI distress and da-da-da-da, well, there's multiple factors that contribute. But I can say beyond a shadow of a doubt that guess what? It's because you have GI problems. Period. You have GI problems. Instead of looking into the GI problems, you blame the sweetener. You blame the food. Now, if you're allergic to it, if you're allergic to an avocado, and I can show you clinical examples. I start most of my inflammation talks off when I used to do them, or even the one I did last week, was about a woman that couldn't tolerate an avocado because she had an allergy to it. So therefore, guess what? An avocado will be bad. So if you actually have any kind of GI problems, just understand you can react to any food. And what I'm giving you is foods. Sweeteners, once again, are things that have glucose and fructose and galactose. And guess what? Actually, a lot of plants do. So what we want to do is we want to dig deep into it. So there's more than just, okay, I felt some distress and you blame the one food. So let's go in. What are some of the factors that determine it? Well, I'll tell you right now. Some of the major factors that to consider being a doc, being a person that has to, give people major changes to their lifestyle. Think about it. If I have a diabetic, type 2 diabetic, and I have a person that's not, guess what happens? My sweeteners that I'm going to give them are going to be different per person. So I want you to think about this. So there's multiple things that come into this. We talked about how much glucose absorbs. If you look at the long chain, polysaccharides, guess what happens? Some sugars don't really absorb that much. So that's a factor. Also availability. Is it water soluble? There's some sugars you can put in a glass of water and they dissolve like crazy. There's some that you can put in water and walk back in 3 days, nothing is dissolved. So it's availability. It's also how much fructose is in there. Now why? Because remember, sometimes when there's a significant amount of fructose, guess what happens? And you have a liver issue, it's going to be difficult. Man, you should have seen the emails I got last week when all of a sudden I just said agave is the highest fructose-based sweetener on the planet. Oh my goodness, I had people tell me how amazing agave is and I'm like going, did you watch what I said? I said it's the highest fructose content, and if you have some fatty liver, you don't want to do it. See, my stuff is all based on clinical things. Theirs is based on emotional challenging them just because they like it and they read some nice article about it, about its benefits. Well, once again, it doesn't blanket everybody that way. But fructose can be a major factor and should be considered. Flavoring. Is it used for flavoring? Is it used for cooking? Once again, just even go back to stevia. Stevia, which actually has high affinity of sweetness, think about it. Could you ever imagine taking a cup of stevia and putting it in a pie? or put it in making cookies with it, man, it would turn from sweet to actually very bitter. See, so some of the sweeteners that I'm going to give you are going to be based on daily recommendations. Because you're going to find out, if people just have some form of sweet taste, a lot of times that actually calms their cravings down and they can deal with it. Now, but also cooking, it's dramatically different. If you do want to make something that has some substance to it, like a cookie or a cake or a bread, you're going to need something that's a little bit more bulky. So therefore, just a flavoring isn't going to work. But here's the big one, especially when we get to my last sweetener. Processing. Once again, let me give you an example. How things are processed are very dramatic. They're very dramatic. That's why, and also sourcing. So sourcing and processing are huge factors. If you think about this, some of the major sweeteners that they try to get, they'll try to pull everything from corn. Now, the original sweetener does not have that in there. It doesn't come from corn. They can just find some chemical similar compound, and they got to massively process it using chemicals and using actually hydrogenation and a bunch of this. I'm going to get this to it. I'm leading you to it. And so therefore, they'll go, well, here's a product, and this is why it's bad. Well, it's taken out of context. Because let me give you an example. There's actually almost every sugar in a lot of different fruits. But if you take a fruit and try to extract that chemical sweetener out of there, man, it'd be so uber expensive you couldn't afford it because, once again, you'd have to buy all the fruit, extract that one sugar from it, and you couldn't put it into bulk. Compared to you can do it with corn, which is basically pennies on a dollar. That's why a lot of your sweeteners that people get confused with actually is extracted from corn because it's cheap and easy and they can mass produce it. That's why if you ever notice, watch even some of your healthiest sweeteners. They'll mix them with some corn-based sweetener to get some bulk to it. That happens a lot with stevia. Just like I told you, stevia is not my top 5. If you look at almost every stevia product out there, now there are some that are not, and I actually use stevia for some things, but I don't have these additives in there. Most stevia, not only, for example, is greatly chemically altered, it also does this. They also usually add some erythritol or dextrose or things like that with it to actually have some substance and bulk to it. Otherwise, you're getting a microfraction of stevia. But because it's so sweet, they tell the big aha moment of, oh my goodness, is that sweet? Because why? There's stevia in there. Heck, we've actually grown stevia itself in our garden a long, long time ago. We used to rent an organic plot over, and actually, no joke, in the tribe here in Wisconsin or in Green Bay. And I remember just even breaking off the stevia plant and actually chewing it, and it was sweet. But I'm like, how did they get that into a white powder? Well, once again, a lot of processing. Once again, they've changed it, and then they added things. So think about that. There's so many factors that go into this. So let's go into my top favorite sweeteners. And I'm going to say it one more time. It's based on my opinion, dealing with patients and clinical experience, and trying to get people that are having problems with their blood sugar. I can honestly tell you, the reason why this is so important is because I want people to actually know that clinically people are approaching us all the time with major blood sugar issues. As these things continue to go up, well, like I said, type 2 diabetes overseas, it's easier to monitor it there because they actually have to pay for it through the government, is becoming a huge governmental strain and stress on political things already. So that's why a lot of their budget goes towards healthcare. Well, if we can start to reverse engineer these things and get the need for insulin and other things down, well, guess what? There's great food sources that can do it. So number 1, what is by far my favorite sweetener? Number 1, monk fruit. Monk fruit. If you look, for example, here's the ripened one. It's on a tree that way. Monk fruit. It's actually, here's one thing that's kind of interesting. The majority of my favorite sweeteners, except for one of them, most of them are not grown in the United States. You don't grow monk fruit in the United States. Well, why is that important? No, because it has some health benefits, but then it also has some things you gotta be very careful with. So why do I like monk fruit? Number 1, it's safe for diabetics. With type 2 diabetes skyrocketing, it's one of the major factors that actually make me think we have to be very careful with our sweeteners. And what can we give them? Well, guess what? Monk fruit is great. It promotes weight loss. I can honestly tell you, the majority of people that did goal setting at the beginning of the year and why gym memberships skyrocket in January, then die off in February, is weight loss. The monk fruit actually has a major effect on it. And they've studied this and they've researched it. They've got so much literature on this. It's amazing. Second of all, it relieves sore throat and phlegm. It's actually known to have some immunological properties that help it with actually even the bacteria and the strep in the throat. Now, the cool thing is they've studied all the anti-inflammatory effects. Now, it's kind of neat. There's a little ingredient. It's called the mogicides. They're actually just the chemical components that do what? Now watch, it's treatment for sore throat, removal of phlegm. Guess what else it does? It actually helps with, like this, anti-cancer effects, helping preventing diabetic complications. And they study these things. Now the good thing is it has so much backing to what it does that they found out it's extremely safe. Now, once again, one of the other major properties that I actually do like we talked about, has a very anti-carcinogenic effect. Meaning what? It has an effect on the immune system. Remember, and I'm going to get this towards the end, because this is something very key that is a whole nother topic when I go into cancers. I think I do it in March sometime. That one of the major contributors of our immune responses is based on sugars. Let me say that again. One of the major factors that affects our immune system is sugars. Our immune system needs sugars. Let me say it again. And at the end, I'm going to show you the correlation between sweeteners. Your body needs fatty acids and proteins. People know that. And then people have demonized sugar because they don't understand it, but don't realize that things like your joints, things like your immune system, connective tissue, almost every cell in the body, actually has some, once again, saccharide component. Your immune system uses a lot of saccharides, a lot of carbohydrates, a form of sugars to actually run. So they found out that this, once again, not only is effective in cancer, but also major leukemia. But what is the correlation? It's a food. Monk fruit is a food. You need to feed every part of your body. And the major component for your immune cells is actually sugars. I want you to think about this. The herbs that the Wellness Way is so intense about is actually a form of sugar. Why do you think they're all pretty much green plants that are actually extracted in alcohol? Well, you can get your sweeteners done that way too. So I want you to think about this. It's so important to understand the therapeutic effect. Now, watch this. I want to thank Dr. Kelvy Culpepper and give a shout out to all of our docs, because here's what happens. Dr. Kelvy wrote our GI, the Wellness Way Approach to GI book. And this is the intensity. She would send me, as she knew I was doing sweeteners, she would send me all the great stuff on monk fruit and other sweeteners and how it has a positive effect and how it can actually do a wonderful thing for the GI itself. So thank you, Dr. Kelvy, for your input on this. But here's a great article that they do, because it was kind of funny. We were dialoguing a little back on this and kind of laughing about it. Now, laughing about it doesn't mean it's not credible. Laughing about it is how they think about this. Because what medicine, what pharmacy, once again, what they're trying to do is they're trying to take any component and either mimic nature. Do you guys understand that? Here, watch this. Aspirin itself, which once again is a pain reliever. Does anybody know where they got aspirin from? Can anybody put in the comments? Does anybody know how they tried to mimic this molecule in nature to actually come up with aspirin? Does anybody know where it came from? Watch this. Willow bark. Willow bark. The components in there, actually the sugars in there, they actually took them and actually manipulated with chemicals, and then that's how it became about. But they're trying to mimic something that already existed in nature. Well, watch this. The pharmacological activities of mogicides, which is one of the major components of monk fruit. Now, I kind of laugh about this and we are kind of laughing about this because if you continue to read the article, yeah, there are great chemical effects. But the most interesting characteristics of mogicides are that they are highly sweet and pharmacologically safe. Well, they're very safe for the body, but what they do is they take them and try to put them at high concentrations and use them like a drug. Because why? These mogicides actually have a very huge immune effect. Considerable progress has recently been made in the determination of pharmacological properties of mogicides. Mogicides have been a definite efficacy of anti-carcinogens, anti-inflammatory, free radical scanners, glucose, and lipid-lowering agents. Now watch it. That's quite amazing. So what they've done, they say, whoa, the body can take this and actually can make it into all these properties. So what does pharmaceuticals want to do? They want to take it, they want to patent it, they want to chemicalize it, and actually try to have an effect to it that way. But all they're doing is actually doing what? They're trying to mimic nature. But nature knows what's doing, so leave it alone. So monk fruit, to me, actually is one of the great things that we can do in order to do what? In order to really make it beneficial for the body. Now, if we look, let's take a look at the major benefits of it. Safe for diabetics, promotes weight loss, relieves phlegm, anti-carcinogen. It's 100 to 250 times sweeter than sugar. Feeds our flora. You say, Doc, well, there is some form of fructose in there. You're right. And the fructose does a wonderful job of feeding the bacteria in the small and especially large intestine. Let me say again, especially the small and large intestine. Now let's step back and take a little clinical thing. You're going to find out if you have any form of small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, SIBO. You have to be careful, even with monk fruit. Even with monk fruit. Because you don't want to feed bacteria that will overgrow. It's why, once again, that when you actually have an overgrowth, a lot of times you don't crave sweets because your body's trying to not feed that way. So, because I know what a lot of people do is say, well, Doc loves monk fruit, I'm going to go out and get it like crazy. Well, once again, the clinical aspect of it, you got to be guided with that. Each person is very different. What else? It's stable when heated. That's really good because a lot of sweeteners are not very stable when heated. So that's why it's a good thing that you can add to actually be a great flavoring. So it's more of a flavor enhancer. It's important. But there's one major downfall when it comes to monk fruit. And if you were on my Instagram the other day, I took a picture. I took a picture of xylitol, and I took a picture of a bag of monk fruit sweetener. And I said, which one's better? And believe it or not, on the Instagram, I actually hugely chose birch xylitol. Now why? Because here's one major downfall that people do not realize about monk fruit. Monk fruit is challenging to grow, harvest, and dry. It's also expensive to import and process organically. This makes monk fruit sweeteners more pricey. It's just like stevia. Here's the major downfall. Most monk fruit, if it comes in bulk, there's usually some major other sweetener, especially erythritol, combined with it. And erythritol is a sugar alcohol. I'm going to be getting to that one. Now, why is that important to know? Because once again, when people say, Doc, it's sweetened with monk fruit, I'm like, okay. You have to be very careful because I have a product right here. Once again, the one that I like, okay? And I need you guys to notice, I'm not showing you the name. You know what I'm saying? Because number one, I don't sell it. And number two, I don't want people to think I'm promoting the product, which is the one I like the most. But here's what happens. This little container, it's once again, USDA certified organic. But guess what happens? It's actually $40 just for that. $40. Let me say it again. $40 just for this. So when I see big bags of, say monk fruit, 0-calorie sweetener, I'm like, well, you're going to find out that the majority of it, if they're trying to stay more healthy, is actually erythritol based, or even if you're in a bad sweetener, a little bit more other sugar alcohols that can be processed. And that's something you bulk, even actually cane sugar itself. So I tell people to be very careful when it says monk fruit, and on top of it, here, they actually have, this company even has a non-organic one. It's probably about $10 cheaper, but it's junk. Well, I don't want any chemicals on this. So the idea is monk fruit can be extremely expensive. Yes, there's major health benefits. Yes. I do like it. It's one of my favorite sweeteners. But guess what? Expensive, hard to process. It rancets very easy. It does. It's one of the reasons why they actually process it and chemicalize it, because it rots very quickly. So that's why even your organic one has a very short shelf life. That's why you won't see it a lot. So even when people say, Doc, it's sweetened with monk fruit, I'm actually very curious if they're using organic monk fruit. Because if they're not, it's probably a highly processed, highly chemicalized thing, and I wouldn't really encourage you to use it. So when I was taking, like I said, Durang, if you're using organic monk fruit, it's actually one of my top favorite sweeteners. Now, next one. Now, people that actually have dealt with me clinically, And we did a little trick when it came to Christy's major thing when it came to her pie that became so popular on our no sugar page. One of my second favorite sweeteners by far is yakin syrup. Okay? It's actually a really, really good syrup. Now this is what it's extracted from, and when you get it and pour it out, it actually looks like molasses. Now the one thing that I absolutely love about yakin syrup, it was in our peanut butter pie recipe. So the reason why I took it out was very simple. Simple thing. I took it out for no sugar January, but it's going to go back into the recipe. And I said, Doc, why'd you take it out? Because it's extremely sweet. And actually it tastes almost kind of chocolatey. So if you have some yakin syrup, dip your finger in, and it's actually probably by far the only sweetener that I can eat right from the jar. You saying? I have no problem sticking my finger in and actually eating it. It has that good a taste. So it's why it's one of my favorite, but also it has some major properties that I actually love. Number one, it's actually a fructooligosaccharide. Now what does that mean? Oligosaccharide. It's a longer chain sugar. If you go back to the first two things, when they're longer chain sugars, they actually become more fibrous. They become actually like a fiber, and actually even the fiber called inulin exists. So therefore, this syrup, yakin syrup, actually does a wonderful job. I mean, it's probably one of the best forms to feed your intestinal flora. So when you actually are, so people always say, Doc, all of a sudden, I took an antibiotic. Should you take some form of probiotic? Yes, but you also want to feed your recovering bacteria that got damaged by the antibiotic itself. So this is one of my favorite things to do for people that actually have had post-antibiotic work. Once again, I'm not saying that sometimes people don't need some antibiotic work. So now, what I want you guys to think about is this. Is it sweet? Yes, it's really sweet. But it has some wonderful properties. If you look, once again, and it talks about the analysis of it that way, it's such a huge fiber that the majority of it doesn't even digest. Okay, so let's take a look at this. The benefits of yakin syrup. There we go, insulin. It reduces overall hunger. It's one of the very few sweeteners that shuts off a hunger hormone in our body. So that actually is amazing if you can see how it promotes some weight loss. But it actually reduces our hunger. It actually inhibits one of the major hunger hormones. So that alone, I'm like going, oh my goodness. Not only could I put it in my coffee to give it a little sweetener, I could put it in anything that actually allows me to say, listen, I want to pull it out. Then why did I take it out of the peanut butter pie? Because I was actually trying to get people during the no sugar January to reduce their even palate, even their mental demand for sugar itself. It was important for us to do that. Now, it actually improves insulin. Yes, it does. It can be consumed with blood sugar issues. It's used more for a flavoring. So, I can honestly tell you that you can get yakin syrup at a very cheap, good cost. It's very low processed. It makes it very readily available. The costs are good. The availability is good. So if you think of it this way, if you're starting, does monk fruit have sometimes maybe a little bit more beneficial characteristics than actually yakin syrup? Sure it does. That's why I put it above yakin syrup. But as far as if you're starting on a budget, if you're starting on actually starting to switch over to something that's much better for you, guess what? Start with this. It's a fantastic sweetener. It doesn't really absorb well, so therefore, guess what? Your liver and other things don't have to deal with it. So therefore, guess what? There's so many health benefits, it's unbelievable. So definitely move into that realm if you're starting your journey now. So now you guys know this. We're going to put it back in the peanut butter pie recipe, knowing the fact that, guess what? It's going to be even better, even though it's really good from what people were doing already with the recipe put out there. But this gives it that little extra dark chocolate flavor within that peanut butter pie. Because it does have kind of a chocolate taste. I kind of like it a lot. Now, my third favorite sweetener, because these two were made mainly for flavorings, So before we go on, let me say this. If I was going to look at flavorings, if you get some proper stevia that is not processed high, stevia would be probably right now. Now I didn't put it in there because you have to do some good investigation on stevias because there's a lot of them that actually promote like they're great and they're really not. Once again, I would actually be more apt for you guys to use green stevia than actually the processed one that turns out white. Or actually use it as an extract that way in an alcohol form, in a dropper. And actually can add some essential oils to it to make it more tolerable. So now, my third favorite one, this shouldn't surprise anybody, and I'm going to have some of this probably when I'm in Hawaii, just by the nature of eating it. Number 3, coconut sugar. Ah, yes. I can tell you right now, one of my favorite bulk sugars there are. So if you do look at some of our dessert recipes, now once again, just to let you know, this is independent, once again, of type 2 diabetes or type 2-1 diabetes, because it does affect your blood sugar. Now, to a much lower extent than most sweeteners, but I'll tell you right now, if you look at the benefits of coconut sugar, it's absolutely amazing. Why? Because all it really is dehydrated sap. That's all it is. It's made from coconut palm sap, and it's dehydrated. So very, very, very minimally processed. And the reason why coconut sugar is actually so readily available is because coconut oil became very popular. So when they're making coconut oil, they're going to have that more opportunity to actually grab the sap and actually make the sweetener. So that's why you can notice that coconut sugar is not that pricey. And it can be used, very similar to sugar when it comes down to, ratios of 1-to-1 and what you want to put in more of a bulk recipe or in a pie crust, things like that. It's used in cooking and baking, very stable under heat. Like I always talk about, you guys know from sugar absorption, you want to actually have a lot of olive oil. Olive oil reduces the absorption of sugars, even if you have something that can raise your blood sugar. But you don't want to heat olive oil because it goes rancid and it doesn't handle heat well. Well, the same thing about this. Coconuts, think of the environment it already does. It's actually very, very stable under high heats. So you can bake with it. You can actually even fry with it if you really want to that way. It's very, very, if you had coconut oil and coconut sugar, fry in the pan, if you want to make some dessert that way, fried dessert, this is one of the best things to source with. Here's one thing I do want you to know. It's the lowest of the glucose availability. That's why if you look at all the sweeteners on the glycemic index, this tanks out the lowest. It does. So it's going to have the lowest change on your blood sugar because it absorbs slower. It actually doesn't get into our bloodstream as easy. There's a lot of other factors like some of the minerals as far as iron, zinc, potassium, magnesium, calcium that slow its absorption down. Your bacteria is going to ferment it a little bit more. So there's major health benefits, and it's a great source for our heart. That's one thing. Now why? Because of the nitrogen. Coconut sugar has nitrogen in it, which for example can actually help develop into other factors that are great for the heart. That's why coconut oil itself actually has some effect on the heart. So there's wonderful source of the heart. Has fiber inulin for the GI. So there's so many benefits. Do you ever notice that one of the biggest things you'll see when it comes to sweeteners, if the sweetener can positively affect the GI, the gut flora, you're going to find out that it's more of a benefit than actually just having direct sucrose, which is fructose and table sugar, which doesn't really feed the bacteria a lot. That's why if you start moving more towards the higher, chained polysaccharides, higher chained oligosaccharides, the saccharides that actually break down slower, you're going to have a more benefit, and it also feeds the microflora, which now protect you from uneven absorption and its readability. So these are great benefits from it. Now, I can honestly tell you, this is probably one of the major sweeteners we use in our home. Actually, even more than the next one, because the next one does have a little bit of problem, even though it's by far one of my favorite. Good old raw honey. Raw honey is fantastic. There are great benefits. Doc, just the other day in your series, you talked about how you had even a beekeeper not do his honey. Yes, once again, as I started out, if you're just watching now, my opinions on sweeteners are based on clinical experience. So if you do have any major liver issue when it comes to fatty liver, and we have to clear it out, yes, there is fructose within honey, so I'm going to do probably the best I can to have you reduce it for a time period. But on the flip side, there's major effects for honey. Now let me tell you something that's kind of a trick. Here's something I'm going to do in Hawaii, and let me explain why. So I think it's in 16 days we get to go to visit our office over in Hawaii. There's a bunch of us going. We're going to have a good time. Do you know one of the first foods I will actually eat since we are going to a different environment? Hawaii. I'm going to teach you a little trick. When I went to Mexico a long time ago, or if I were to go overseas, or if I was to go to any area that's out of my normal environment that I live in, the first thing I'm going to go to is actually raw honey. Now, let me give you a little something on this. And this is just a clinical example so you can get my point. Let's say I have somebody that says, Doc, I'm going to Mexico, and I was even diagnosed with fatty liver. So I know you want me to stay away from honey so we can get that liver to clear out and get it working better. But I'll tell you this. I'll look at him or her and I'll say, can you do me a favor? Can you go to one of your local stores and see if they have any raw honey? Now people say, well, why? Because this is one of the most fascinating things and why I love honey so much. But let me say, I want to change this from raw honey to local raw honey. Because here's what they found out. Man, they've studied this and it's quite amazing. Honey, actually not only, and if you notice, I actually let's come back here. With the propolis and the bee pollen and also the wax, you want to actually have raw local honey in this form, because what you're going to do when you take honey is you are going to do this. You're going to bring in the environment from that animal, from the honeybee to your body, which now gives you an adaptation on the inside of your body so you can actually deal with a lot of things, including other things within the environment, from other bugs to pollens to its environment, that you couldn't if you didn't have it. See, what they found out is that when people started to take raw honey in the area that they lived, it reduced their amount of even seasonal allergies, because the bees take it in, they process it, they put it in a separate compartment in their body, and when you ingest it, it makes it much easier for you to take it in and your immune system use those sugars. That fascinates me. So when I go to Hawaii, I want my immune system to be able to adapt to the environment of Hawaii, from its outside exposure, from the pollens, from other bacteria. So I'm going to eat the honey as quickly as I can when I get there. No joke. I'm going to have a dragon fruit, so I'm going to take the local fruit, local pineapple. That's why I tell everybody when I get to Hawaii, one of the reasons why I said I'm going to have some sugar is the fact that it's going to be based on their organic environment of their organic fruit, their organic raw honey. So my immune system can adapt to those surroundings because I haven't been there for over a year. So that's a fascinating thing I love about honey. That's why, even though I want somebody to kind of stay away from it if they do have some major liver problems, just because your liver has to convert fructose very quickly into something storage-wise. But man, the properties of honey are dramatic when you look at your body trying to adapt to the environment around it. That's why I'm kind of fascinated with this food. So it's like that struggle. It's like, for people that have damaged themselves, I got to draw back onto it. But man, if you notice this, a lot of times people that have seasonal allergies, and the times that they do, and maybe it flares up in May. Man, I'm like, in April, let's see if we can get some local honey for you and start to get you to consume it, because then they can see that there's sometimes some allergy reduction just from that. Now, are there other benefits? Of course there are. It's good for sore throats. It reduces dry cough. If you ever know anybody that actually had an infection or anything like that, but they have a barking dry cough, have them take some, once again, raw local honey. It will coat the throat and soothe it. Just like, as you can see, it's good for wounds, it's good for burns, because it coats and soothes and protects it. The antioxidant and antimicrobial effects are dramatic. So it's good to use in those areas. So if you notice your child actually having a barking cough, guess what happens? There can be a great way to actually calm it down and help them sleep better. Here's one thing I love about it. It has hydrogen peroxide in it. And that's why honey has been known to actually affect E. coli and also H. pylori. So if you've been here before and on your stool test, you have high amounts of E. coli or high amounts of H. pylori on your stool test, sometimes you'll see on your recommendation sheet 1 teaspoon of honey, 1 tablespoon of honey, because now it's clinically applicable to your stool test. Now, doc, But if somebody had a diagnosis of fatty liver, you're right. So there's the conundrum. We're trying to figure out what is the best source for each person. That's the cool aspect about it. Now, what else? It protects the brain against lead. Man, I always find this funny. Moms will text me and they'll message me and say, Doc, they say don't give a child honey under 1 year old. And I ask the parents, did you vaccinate that child? And they're like, yes. I'm like, you're going to really ask me about honey then? I know it's going to sound interesting because why? Pediatrician vaccinated him and then said, don't give him honey. I'm like, actually, the funny part is the honey has an affinity to actually draw lead out. It's very protective for the brain. So what I want you to understand is, so when people say, Doc, don't give them honey under 1 year old. I don't know clinically where they're saying that. Now, could it be something, the fact that when it's processed and some of the allergens that are in there and it loses its microbial process to protect it? That can be. But don't classify that as honey. That's a chemical process that they call honey. It's like processed sugar. Processed sugar has very health properties, but when you process it, you make things too readily available and it's not its original chemical structure. So your body doesn't even know what to do with it properly. Okay, it's also a whole superfood. Actually, no joke. There's certain cultures that sometimes ate honey by the bucketfuls during certain seasons of the year that they survived on. It actually has a lot of properties besides just a sweetener. Now, once again, United States, sometimes, with the obesity rate and type 2 diabetes rate and the fatty liver issues, maybe also, like we talked about, Latinos and Japanese, they have a higher aspect of fatty liver. You gotta be a little careful with this one. So, but there are major great benefits. Now, with all those four in place, I can honestly tell you, the next one, I think, is dominant for me when it comes to be my favorite. All right? And there's so many myths that even somebody posted on the No Sugar January page about this next sweetener. I have studied this so extensively. And so I'm going to get rid of some of the myths that you hear so people stop repeating these. Because a person posted an article of somebody that said, I don't like this and I'm probably not going to use this because of this article. And I read the article and there's no validity to it whatsoever. Because what they did is they take it out of context. And here it is. Xylitol. Xylitol. But what's the key up there? Birch bark. Okay? Now, it's one sweetener, with the exception of honey, that we can get locally. Because why? Birch trees are readily available, especially as you get into more cold environments. But let me go over this. When they look at these things, they look at the number one source of xylitol is not coming from birch bark. It's not coming from birch bark. Yes, there's xylose and other sugars in other things at small amounts. One of the highest concentrations of xylitol is actually in two sources, birch bark and corn. So that's why when people tell me so much about how xylitol affected them, the first thing is this. The article that somebody posted yesterday on our page was talking about how it's hydrogenated and chemicalized. Yes, you're right. That is right. Corn xylitol is that way. Let me say it again. Corn xylitol is that way. But you took it out of the context because that's not how they actually facilitate when it comes to birch bark. There's the big key. Your sourcing is key. So I'm going to tell you right now, I am just not a fan, once again, of actually using corn for a sweetener. Now, you say, Doc, xylitol is a sugar alcohol. Well, I don't even like that term because it's actually not fully like a sugar and it's not an alcohol. Now, I know what they're doing. I know how they've come up with that, but it's kind of a misleading term because people say, Doc, with the alcohol, can it cause... No. Remember, if you really think about it, a lot of this is actually just produced and actually extracted by fermentation. Now, if you want to make it, mass produce it, use corn and hydrogenate it and chemicalize it, absolutely, I see why it's. That's why if you ever look, like I told you, like stevia, the majority of xylitol out there, I'm not a fan of. I'm not a fan of all. I want to get to my great birch bark sources that actually do this. Well, Doc, once again, what about the other sugar alcohols like erythritol? If I had no choice, that's the thing. If I had no choice, I could be okay with non-GMO based erythritol. But the majority of erythritol is actually processed from what? GMO corn. If you look at the bag that I put it on my Instagram picture the other day, where I had the birch xylitol and the monk fruit, that's actually, the monk fruit, you understand that 98% of that bag, I think, was actually erythritol with some monk fruit in it. See, so people thought I was going to say the monk fruit and the erythritol because it's a sugar alcohol and there's 0 calories. Well, can xylitol affect your blood sugar a little bit? Yes, it can. It's more of a fiber, okay? That's why sometimes people actually will get some bowel movements go through there pretty quickly because they're actually lacking fiber. But the idea is this: birch-based xylitol and how it's produced is dramatically different than corn xylitol. So when you tell me that xylitol is bad, you actually, I'm sorry, you do not know what you're talking about. If you categorize birch bark xylitol and corn xylitol, they're 2 different products. Actually, even nutritionally, they're very different. So I'm not a fan of corn xylitol. I'm not a true fan of a lot of erythritol. Now, I'm not saying that I wouldn't eat erythritol. I'm just saying it would have to be not available birch bark xylitol. So just remember, there's major health benefits to xylitol that you don't get from any other sugar alcohol. That's why a lot of people try to classify xylitol with all the other sugar alcohols. I'm going, don't do that, because they each have different properties, but there's significant, documented, so much literature on xylitol, it'll blow your mind. And when they do it, they're not using corn xylitol. They're using birch bark xylitol. So I hope I beat that enough into your head. So when somebody writes a bad article about xylitol, just send them a response back. Is it corn you're talking about? And they won't know what they're talking about. They're like, no, xylitol. No, guess what? It's like this. You can get a lot of things from corn and other sources that's originally not meant to be sourced from. Remember, food companies are businesses. They jump on the bandwagon. Everybody started to realize that monk fruit was good, so what they do? They put a big old monk fruit advertising out there, and the majority of it, if you don't read the label, is erythritol. And you get a little bit of monk fruit in there, so you're like, oh, look, I'm doing monk fruit. I'm like, no, you're doing 98% erythritol with a little bit of monk fruit in there. That's why you have to understand what these food companies do. It's all marketing. So the majority of your xylitol products you see in the grocery store, even in the health food store, is actually corn-based. I'm going to encourage you not to do those, because corn is very difficult on our system. That's why I don't really care about corn too much. Now, once again, birch bark is much more expensive than erythritol. So if you're going to start somewhere, then start with erythritol, but just know this. If you have any problem with corn, you're going to have a problem with this. So then what made you get so obsessed with xylitol? Because xylitol has properties that are major immunological. And as you guys know, astragalus by far is my favorite herb, but my obsession with other things is actually medicinal mushrooms. Why? I'm going to show you why. So what properties does xylitol have that make it my by far dominant sweetener that I love? Okay, depends on circumstances. Now, here it is. Xylitol is naturally occurring in a lot of plants and materials, including fruits and vegetables. But it's extracted from birchwood, not corn. Let me say it again. Now, this is WebMD. I pulled off because it pulls off of PubMed. But it says, is extracted from birchwood to make medicine. It has its medicinal properties. It does not say corn. Corn does not have the medicinal properties that birchwood does. Now, here's what I love about it. Yes, they talk about gums. Xylitol is used to prevent middle ear infections, otitis media. It doesn't even get to the gums yet. But the microbial, the digestive, the immunological component, kids that actually get xylitol at a young age have a much less occurrence of actually ear infections. So a sugar actually helps people have less chance of an ear infection. Now, they do talk about, yes, it's good for teeth. It helps with produces things for teeth, makes it very strong. It tastes really sweet, unlike sugar. It doesn't convert in your mouth into acids that cause tooth decay. See, a lot of the sugars can actually start to break down your mouth. Xylitol does not. It's actually a longer saccharide. So therefore, it doesn't break down in our mouth. Actually, it only breaks down a little bit in our intestinal tract, and that's why a little bit can actually affect your blood sugar. But the immunological properties are significant, and I love this. It reduces levels of decay causing bacteria in saliva, and also acts against some bacteria that cause ear infections. But it's also this. Doc, I had birch bark xylitol in one of the desserts, and I got diarrhea. Yeah, you need a stool test. No, because when I didn't eat it, it went away. Yeah, and that overgrowth and that intestinal problem that you have that caused you to have diarrhea, to have gas and bloating, to actually not feel good when you ate xylitol, birchwood xylitol, is because you have some form of infection in your colon, and you need a stool test. So when people tell you about their disruptions, it's more about their GI problems, because when this medicinal thing comes into your body, it's going to change it. Now, let me say this again, because I know where people go when I say xylitol. And my media team is actually behind the scenes right now, and Uriah is kind of watching comments and things like that. Now, did we lose connection for a short time? Oh, my phone, it knocked me off. Must be my phone. Okay? But what I want you to think about is this, is when I said xylitol, some of you pet people just about lost it probably. And like, oh my goodness, but it even says, once again, it's not meant to be in their GI, and it can be harmful for them. Do you understand that I actually watch people care more about xylitol than their dogs, and then they'll drive their kids through McDonald's and tell me moderation's okay? Yes, I was just extremely critical of you as a parent. Doc, I don't want to give my child, or I don't want to can't have xylitol in the house because if my dog gets it. But you know something? I go through your cupboard, and I'd actually be more worried about what you're feeding your child and your family. Or actually, I look at your medication list that you give a child. Or I look once again, you give them a vaccine, and you're more worried about your dog getting xylitol. Let's put this into proportion, people. You think I'm joking. 2020, like I said, I'm going to push you guys extremely intensely about some of the stuff that we hear. And so any of you guys that put, well, be careful with dogs, be careful about your comments. Because as I go through your Facebook, because I'm a stalker, as I go through your Facebook, when you make a comment like that, and I see you in Cancun with a Corona and eating a bunch of junk, and you're concerned about your dog and xylitol, why don't you have some concern about yourself? Why don't you have some concern about things that really matter? I'm not saying give your dog xylitol, but be congruent. Be congruent. You're more worried about something your dog can get into than actually what you're feeding your kids. I actually had a patient one time just be like, and she actually, I think, cared more about her dogs than she did about her children. And she was more obsessed about xylitol being in her house, yet she had no problem, and actually said she had no problem actually giving her kids sweets and treats that are actually toxic. I know this was just a 30-second butt chewing, but think about it. So if your thing right away popped in that you're actually worried about animals and take it wrong. I love animals, so don't get me wrong on this. I had a cat for 17 years. My sister breeds boxers. I love them. I am a dog fan. I actually am more of a dog fan than I'm a cat fan. I love going over at my sister's and playing with her boxers, and she actually raises them. They're amazing. So don't get me wrong about animals. But I'm saying, for you guys that freak out because you're worried about xylitol, I'd be more concerned what you're putting in your body than your dog getting in xylitol. Be congruent on this. Remember, your health goes bad. Remember, guess what happens? You may not have the money to have a dog because you can't afford it because you actually so darn sick. Remember that. Be congruent on these things. Now, so you look at it this way. That's why I love it. It talks about the uses and effectiveness. Once again, good for tooth decay, but I love this. Here's one thing I put on this part that's not in the first part. If you look, it reduces the number of ear infections they get and the need for antibiotics. They found out that, guess what? As they studied birchwood medicine, the medicinal properties of it, and the effect on the immune system, they found that kids that did this had less need for antibiotics. Can I say that again? It's, that's why I tell people, it's like, listen, there's more medical literature and studying this stuff, but it's never put in medical practice. because there's no benefit financially for pharmaceuticals. There's no benefit for doctors to say, change your diet and eat xylitol. But it actually reduces the amount of antibiotics that people are actually using. Now, I'm going to go from this to something that seems absolutely unrelated, but it's not. Because these polysaccharides, these oligosaccharides, these sugars actually help with the immune system. But let's go here. Medicinal mushrooms as an attractive new source of natural compounds for a future of cancer therapy. See, medicinal mushrooms, as I told you, actually have major polysaccharides that your immune system uses to actually do what once again, your immune system was supposed to feed it to actually kill off cancers. That's why I'm so obsessed with medicinal mushrooms. There's chaga and reishi right in my coffee right now. My girls and my wife are going to take medicinal mushrooms on a regular basis. Why, doc? What's wrong? Nothing. We're going to feed their immune system the sugar it needs. Did you hear me say that again? We're going to feed the immune system the sugar it needs. And watch this. So there's so much research on this, but hold the phone. Chaga, one of the most important medicinal mushrooms on the planet. Coriolis, turkey tail, lion's mane, reishi. Watch this. Do you guys know what trees they're growing on? Do you see it? Do you see what they're growing on? Uriah, what are they growing on? Birch bark. That's why you'll see that me and Christy and girls walking through the woods, and all of a sudden on Instagram I'll post a picture about a chaga up there. I love that stuff. I was up by my tree stand. Uriah said, look at that. See that right there? On the birch, that's a chaga right there. And I love medicinal mushrooms. But the sugars within them are so intensely great for your immune system. What it does, those polysaccharides give the availability structure and actually feed the immune system so it can destroy cancer. Now, well, doc, what kind of literature and base they have that? Well, let's go back to WebMD and let's take one of my favorite mushrooms, Coriolis. I take a drop of this because you actually can extract it in alcohol. You extract it in water too. You actually soak your medicinal mushrooms and actually pull some medicine out. Now, look at this. I just pulled this off of WebMD. Here we go. Coriolis is a type of mushroom. These substances of Coriolis that may act like medicines. Two of these substances are what? What's that right there? Polysaccharides. Sugars. Let me say it again. Sugars. Let me say it again. Sugars. PSP and PSK. The PSK are commonly taken by mouth to improve the response to chemotherapy and radiation in people with cancer. Hold the phone. Did you just hear that? It's well documented. That's why I kind of laugh when people go to the oncologist and they say, well, natural things don't help, even though I hate that term. Any person that you know that has cancer, any person going through chemotherapy and radiation should be on some form of sugar, medicinal mushroom, that actually is going to help them respond to even the toxic effects of chemotherapy and radiation and give them a better chance to survive it. Because you're going to feed your immune system that can help you go after the cancer. But it also feeds your immune system to actually deal with all the toxic effects of this stuff. It's well documented. It also is used to stimulate the immune system. I don't like the word stimulate, it feeds it. Treat infections, treating liver and lung disorders. But here we go. Coriolis mushroom contains polysaccharides. These are believed to help fight tumor growth and boost the immune system. So, when people come to me and they say, Doc, you could just do ketogenic diet. You don't need sugars. Sugars are bad for you. They're taking it so out of context. The person probably also believes that xylitol is bad for you too. And it's hydrogenated. Because they take it out of context that that's corn. Guess what? Sugars are essential for life. You need glucose for your brain. Every cell in your body, once again, actually does best with glucose. But what happens is this, because you don't understand the availability, because you don't understand the conversions, because you don't understand your body and how much you need, because you don't know what state your body's in, what happens is people are like, sugar is bad. But doc, you doing a no sugar January and people improving show that sugar is bad. No, what I showed you is you don't understand your body and the sugar that you need and what you need to do with it. So is sugar bad? Absolutely not. It's essential for life. But what is bad is the understanding, the perspective that people have on sugar. Sugar is a big part of your immune system. Do you understand? If you have too much readily available glucose, it will ferment and actually feed cancer. If you eat the sugars that actually feed your immune system and not leave the glucose available for cancer, it will go after and kill it. That's why the medical profession doesn't get this. That's why all healthcare professions, including natural, don't get this. But the Wellness Way perspective that I taught you from part 1, part 2, and part 3 is such a different perspective on sugars that these fallacies have to stop. Everything that I gave you, with the exception of today, is actually well documented. Like I said, I gave you my opinion on sweeteners, but I also documented why the sweeteners are so good and their relatives to it, and why it actually affects you so significantly. See, so we got to get out of this aspect that's bad. In general, people are eating too much available glucose. It's why there is type 2 diabetes. But to actually not understand your forms of sugar, your availability, how fast it raises your glucose, how fast it affects your insulin, how much it affects your hemoglobin A1C. See, that's where you need to get tested. You need to get an overview of your body, because then maybe, guess what? Honey is bad for you, but maybe honey is life-giving to you. Maybe, once again, monk fruit is great for you, and maybe it's not. So, in general, did I give you my 5 favorite ones if you had no money to test? Absolutely. And you can actually experiment with them a little bit and see how it goes. Would I rather have you have a greater understanding of your body? Yes. That's the Wellness Way perspective. The Wellness Way approach is actually looking at you and saying, what do you need? What is going to make you the best version of you? And if you never will hear one of our doctors generalize, you will never hear me generalize that this is all good for you. But if you don't have the understanding about sugars, if you don't have the perspective, you go and take charge of your health, and sometimes you're hurting yourself. That's why, if you ever notice, if you totally deplete every sugar out of your system, it'll be bad. It'll be bad. You're not meant to live in ketosis forever. So when people tell you your body can run off ketones better than glucose, I don't know where they get that. If people tell you don't need sugar, I don't know where they get that. If people tell you that xylitol is bad for you, I don't know where they get that. They're taking everything out of context. And if you really think about it, the majority of talk about sugar has nothing to do with health today. It's all to do with weight. And yes, are people obese at all-time high? Absolutely. But it doesn't mean sugar is bad. Your perspective on sugar is bad. And that's why I tell people, you need to do what, guys? To stop listening and start learning, and then you'll think differently. I'm hoping this 1, 2, and 3 parts on sugar change your perspective on sugar. Guess what? We're going to continue to give you great information and things like this for you to actually make your choices so you can think differently and then act differently. But watch 1, 2, and 3 over and over and over again, especially 1 and 2. Because I gave you my 5 top sweeteners, but you have to understand it. If you just watch for the first time today, go back and watch 1 and 2. They're on Facebook, but also they eventually go on our YouTube channel. If you're not on our YouTube channel, go over to the Wellness Way YouTube channel or the Dr. Patrick Flynn YouTube channel. We host those things on there. Because once you have a greater understanding of sugar, once you have a different perspective, every Saturday, I will give you a different perspective that I guarantee that if you've been watching me for years, or if you've just new watching me, you're always going to walk around with that aha moment going, oh my goodness. Because you know what my goal is? My goal isn't to sell you anything. My goal is to get you to think differently. Now, I'm going to be traveling next week. I'm going to be in Denver both Tuesday and Wednesday, speaking up in Louisville, and then speaking down the south side of Denver. Then on Thursday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I'm going to be in Denver area. Thursday, I'm going to be in Oregon, Burns, Oregon. Then I'm going to be in Portland speaking on Saturday. So I'm doing 4 hormone connection talks in 5 days. If you're in the areas, you can go to my website, drpatrickflynn.com. And all that website is this. It just tells you where I'm speaking. Because sometimes it's hard to navigate trying to find it on the Wellness Way page. So you can go to drpatrickflynn.com and actually see where I'm speaking. Because we've got a bunch of events I actually added a ton of events this spring, and then come May, I'm stopping all them because, once again, getting into my daughter's golf season in summer, and then we got some volleyball, so I'm doing a little bit of speaking during the spring each year now. But you can actually come see the perspective on hormones that will change the direction of your life. So, that being said, I'll see some of you guys next week. I'll see some of you guys in Hawaii when I'm there, and a couple weeks after that. But remember this, the Wellness Way is there to give you a different perspective so you can approach healthcare differently. Once again, my name is Dr. Patrick Flynn. Thank you so much for joining me on A Different Perspective this morning. Hey, thank you for watching. Make sure to subscribe to this channel so you don't miss a single video or live stream. Also, share this video with a friend. Once again, thank you for watching.